Hey everybody, it's Alex Miller at Capneon here. The big news story just out is that all of the independent board directors on the board of well-known genetic testing company 23andMe have all quit together en masse following a dispute with the CEO. I am going to give the kind of longer backstory of 23andMe because I think it's useful to set the stage. I'm going to cover the current events directly and talk a little bit about the nature of the conflict. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and data privacy. This story is not in the vein of the things I usually talk about, but there are a whole lot of themes that are common themes in the artificial intelligence world. And 23 has come up a lot in data privacy contexts in the past. And unfortunately, I think there's some pretty ugly and negative projections you might need to make out of these events as well. Let's start from the beginning. 23andMe makes a kit that you can use to give yourself a saliva test. You mail it in, and they tell you some things about your ancestry. A whole lot of people have done it. They were a bit of a darling at one point in the past with a high-flying stock price. What has gone wrong? Well, they turned out not to be very good at making money. People really only need to get this genetic test once. That shouldn't sneak up on somebody. It was apparently the plan that longer term, the idea to make money was to build a big database of people's genetic data and work with drug companies to use this data to develop new treatments, etc. So, in between the lines, the plan was to sell your data in a way. That hasn't worked out either. So, this company has raised lots of money. They've gotten kind of big. They have lots of expenses. Oh, oops, they seem like they can't make money. Later in this video, I'll talk about why times have changed and people suddenly care when they didn't care. But people snapped out of it, and this company looked like a black hole that you could dump your money into and lose it, and their stock price plummeted, and they're kind of a penny stock now. For 5 months, the CEO and the board had been talking about taking 23andMe private. It's a pretty common thing for a publicly traded company in trouble to try to go private. And I'll say even what this means and kind of explain why. Publicly traded company has to tell Wall Street all the time a lot of things about what they're doing in order to be publicly traded. This tends to enforce a lot of short-term mindset in that anybody on Wall Street that owns the stock can make a fuss more or less every quarter about how they feel like you're doing a bad job. And in cases where things are really off the rails and the game plan really needs to change a whole lot, it's sensible to take the company private, which means no longer on the stock exchange. It's owned by less people who have close relationships. And hopefully implement a longer term plan with less interference in the middle that will get the company back to someplace worth being. So this has been going on since April. The CEO and the board and people at the company have been working on a plan to take the company private. So this would involve somebody showing up with a bunch of money to buy out all the stock that's out there to where you could have everybody that owned the company agree to do things a different way. Sounds like it hadn't been working out, and that the independent board directors were a little bit frustrated of there didn't seem to be a real plan. None of this seemed realistic. It's worth noting here that the CEO and some other people closely affiliated with the company own a whole lot of the stock. And so there's a little bit of awkwardness here. And it's a common problem I'll discuss more in a minute. If you're on the board, you're sort of supposed to be in charge. And it sounds a little like there was some repeating deja vu going on where the board is trying to say, hey, this isn't working, and then the management of the company is continuing to try to do it. The CEO and some other affiliated people own enough of the stock that they can kind of do what they want. So if you're on the board, you might feel like, well, I have this job I'm supposed to do and my reputation is on the line, but I really don't have the power to make things happen. And the things that are happening are not the things that I think should be happening given my responsibilities, and I don't really have an ethical, sensible way forward. And so that's about how you get to resigning en masse. So I want to point out a whole lot of general themes here that are relevant to AI. And I guess it's worth starting with macroeconomics. This company got pretty big without having an effective business model. And around about the pandemic, we went through what's probably going to be looked back on as a macroeconomic paradigm shift. Before pandemic, it was implicitly a much more acceptable business model to raise money from investors forever and keep doing so on the hopes that in the future something exciting was going to happen. This invariably happens around really hot new technologies. I've made it sound kind of negative. This does make sense in that a new technology is going to take a while to find its feet, and it doesn't make sense to ask that things be profitable right away. And if nothing else, it's just tough for business that expectations have shifted. So it's very relevant in the AI world, I think. Companies like OpenAI are not really making money in your grandfather's profit and loss sense. They're raising lots of money based on expectations they could do something really cool that could become very lucrative in the future, but it's not now. And this is relevant in a lot of different areas of technology. The pressure is greater to actually make some money. And I think a lot of people didn't notice. It was kind of weird how much in business, certain sectors of business profit was not really important. Something in common with the AI world here as well is that there was a bit of, oh, we'll get a mountain of data, ... profit. Data is the new oil is a thing people used to say, and 23andMe is a good example of this. There was an idea like, oh, we'll have all this data, and then when we have all the data, that's when we will start to make money, and it didn't work. So they got this big pile of data, and they don't have a profitable business model. A big pile of data is a liability. So among other travails, 23andMe had a big data breach a while ago. Lost some pretty sensitive stuff, didn't handle it well. I think is currently about to pay out a lot of money they don't really have to people that sued them because of this data breach. And, finally, this is all kind of a data privacy disaster in a way that AI has a lot of forces in it that present a lot of danger. People are hoarding up a whole lot of data and moving it around. That sets the stage for lots of data to get lost in a toxic way. Closing thought, and it's a little bleak. I think the data world in the broad arc of time is pretty young, and it's something we're really exploring for the first time. Companies with big mountains of data becoming dilapidated and dying. If 23andMe wasn't doing a job protecting all the sensitive data before, when they were high flying and people were really ready to invest in them, it seems to me extremely unlikely that this kind of turbulence and this kind of financial stress are going to make anything better for anybody. So we'll see what happens. This is definitely a story to watch for a variety of reasons. Even if you're not really interested in the genetic testing aspect, just data and the business of data.